For 7 years, I've been working with the Alexei Navalny's team, the Anti-Corruption Foundation. It's the Russian opposition organization, the biggest opposition movement. We had a huge presidential campaign in 2017. But now, since the political repressions getting crazier and crazier, and they arrest every single person who goes to the street, if they notice you at protests several times, and there is surveillance in Moscow, there are cameras everywhere in the streets, so they already know, you're a target. If you were at the protest once, then twice, then 3 times, you are a target for them. You realize that if you go against Putin, you're a threat to the regime, and anything can happen.
Anna's been worried about her English.
Of course.
And there's been not a word wrong.
No need to worry about any of that.
You know, we had an interesting conversation on the way down.
About what?
You're going to find this one interesting about Telegram.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What's the interesting conversation there?
Well, not everything might be as we think.
What do you mean?
What do you think? What did you think?
Well, so I think between Danny and I'm going to make this a joint statement. Mm-hmm. I think we established a position of free speech is obviously important. It feels like an attack on free speech. But at the same time, the platform is used by criminals to commit criminal acts. And so when you make a comparison to something like Facebook, if Facebook get a demand from UK police, US FBI, they will usually comply. The only big tech I've seen where they haven't complied is unlocking Apple phones. But generally, large platform holders comply, whereas Telegram refused to, said they won't comply. And so there is an argument I'm not agreeing or disagreeing, but the argument, the steel manning it from the point of law enforcement, it's like your platform is being used by terrorists, criminals, drug dealers, pedophiles. We would like to speak to these people. We'd like to do an investigation. And at your point of view, you had a point of view regarding the encryption, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why they didn't just make it an encrypted chat. And then, I think your argument should be, I can't give you the information, not I won't give you the information.
Yeah.
That would be
probably,
the
probably they
signal.
can.
They can
give
the
information.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then with regards to the leadership and governance, the belief that it was a free speech platform and historically was not pro-Russia or had historically told Russia to fuck off when Russia wanted access to information. But you told me a slightly different potential version.
Yeah. So there was an investigation after those latest news. Everyone was investigating what happened to Telegram, what's the story behind that. And Important Stories Media published that investigation about Pavel Durov visiting Russia more than 50 times over the past 10 years after he told publicly that he will never go back to Russia again after 2014 when he left the country. He actually visited Russia more than 50 times, and we can find this information from the leaked database of the border control. And every time when the Russian government was attacking Telegram, Pavel Durov was inside the country. Even if there was a criminal case against Pavel Durov, he could be inside the country. And it doesn't work like that in Russia. If they go against you, if they go really against your platform, you are in big trouble, and you cannot visit the country anymore. But he was there more than 50 times, and he was there every time when the government tried to ban the platform, when the government tried to stop the Russian opposition doing something on Telegram. Durov was there, and he was free to move around. And when the Russian government tried to ban Alexei Navalny's team project that was on Telegram, and that Telegram channel was banned eventually by Pavel Durov. He was in Russia at that very moment. So there are many reasons to suspect that everything is not as clean as
So you think he may have some kind of allegiance with the Kremlin?
Captured?
There are more and more evidence proving this fact, and now everyone I know prefer to switch from Telegram to platforms like Signal.
I mean, Signal's so much better. I was always surprised that Telegram didn't go to like default encrypted chat a long time ago.
I don't know what was the reason, but we were always careful with this. And anyway, if we wanted to discuss something very sensitive, we prefer to go out to the street to talk in person, not even in the building. So yeah, Telegram is not the place where you can openly talk about anything. Yeah, especially in the light of the latest news. It's very suspicious.
I mean, we will get into your full background, but I think if you're working for the Human Rights Foundation, if you've worked on Navalny's campaign, which was routinely attacked by Russia, and if you have sensitive communications that you need to pass, I guess in such a situation as with what's happened recently with Telegram, you're less emotional about it and about the debates regarding free speech. You're more factually based and objective because you have to protect data and communications.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Telegram is still the best platform, the best messenger, because it's not only a messenger. You can have channels on Telegram. You can start your anonymous channel. You can publish like whatever you want there. So many opposition movements, many organizations have their channels and they use it as a big media platform because there are many, like thousands of subscribers. And it felt more or less safe to use that platform. And it's still not banned inside Russia. For example, YouTube now is slowed down in Russia, and there is less and less access to different platforms where Russian opposition movements can operate. And Telegram is still not banned, and there are millions of users of Telegram. So, like, we prefer to use it as a media platform where we can publish something, but as a communicational platform, it's not really an option today.
Are you suspicious as to why Telegram is not banned? Because it would be a very easy platform for people to be able to freely communicate.
Yeah, of course. If something is not banned, then there is a reason for that. And if it's not attacked by the Russian government, probably it has some relations with the Russian government.
Do you know his background, Pavel? Do you know what he was doing before Telegram?
I can't remember.
So it's amazing because I hadn't made the connection. So did you ever see that Russian version of Facebook? Because you could not get Facebook in Russia. So there was a Russian Facebook. It was created by Pavel. But the incredible thing about it, he just completely copied Facebook's design.
Yeah.
He just changed the name, right?
Yeah, there was a different name and some additional features. And it was like, and it still is the most popular platform in Russia, social network. It's called Vkontakte.
So is that where he made all his money? Because I never understood how he was so rich from Telegram.
Yeah, Vkontakte is the most popular platform in Russia. And I think every second Russian has an account there.
I see.
Yeah, but eventually Russian government realized that this is a threat for the regime because it's anonymous and there are, like, people can discuss there anything they want, and some opposition movements can do whatever they want. And actually, Russian government was very much interested to get access to Vkontakte after 2014, after what happened in Ukraine, after Maidan, after Ukrainians communicating there, and they wanted to get access to messages, to some names, and Pavel Durov refused to provide this information. And since then, they started attacking Durov and his business, and eventually he was forced to give the business to a friend of Putin. I mean, he didn't give it, but they just took it from him, and he left the country in 2014, and he told, I will never go back to Russia again. And he even released the statement, like a list of 7 statements why you shouldn't go back to Russia anymore. And it included like there is no freedom of speech in the country, and you cannot have your business, like successful business in Russia, because the government will take it from you. And as a protest against this, he created Telegram as a safe space for people to communicate anonymously. But what's happening now is very suspicious, and it's not only from the perspective of Russian government attacking or collaborating with him, but also Durov. For example, he just apologized in front of South Korean government for some posts on Telegram that were like some deepfakes or something like that was published there, and he censored it and he deleted that content and he apologized because he was asked to do that or forced to do that. I don't know, but he publicly decided to censor some content and to regulate some content, which means that it's not that.
That means that he can moderate the content.
He can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Back to your point.
Yeah. Just that's why it was so frustrating when I know Tucker Carlson had some Signal messages leaked, didn't he? And then he went out kind of on a bit of a rampage against Signal, saying that it wasn't like secure chat. Almost certainly he had Pegasus on his phone or something like that. Like I'm sure it wasn't the Signal encryption that was broken. That seems almost impossible. And then he comes out and says Telegram's the more secure communication channel, which is just a lie. And it drives more people to a less secure app. It's also frustrating.
I think we're, even with the security of a Signal, and with things like Pegasus out there, I feel like you're heading more and more to a society where I almost don't want a phone. Like having a phone is a risk.
But I mean, you need to communicate.
I can get someone to make my calls for me.
Can't
like Danny.
Even if you communicate on Telegram, I mean, we have this policy. If it's a group or there are more than 10 people in the group, highly likely information will leak anyway. Even if Durov doesn't read your messages, someone from the group can leak information, can screenshot or forward your messages. So even like communicating on Signal or anywhere else, we're super careful and we don't discuss sensitive things in big group chats. Yeah.
Well, listen, we should probably let people listening know who you are. You have 2 jobs.
Yeah. Currently, I have 2 jobs. For 7 years, I've been working with the Alexei Navalny's team, the Anti-Corruption Foundation. It's the Russian opposition organization, the biggest opposition movement of Russia, the organization that is fighting against Putin's regime since 2011. And half a year ago, I joined the Human Rights Foundation, where I work as a nonprofit Bitcoin adoption lead, because I have a lot of experience at the Anti-Corruption Foundation operating with Bitcoin. Because the Russian government, when they go against you, when they go against your organization, first thing they do is they ban your bank accounts. They kick you out from the banking system. And we had to use Bitcoin in our work a lot. And I have this experience, and I use this experience to educate activists from all over the world how to use Bitcoin in their work. So these are my 2 main jobs right now.
And you're in exile from Russia?
Yes, I left Russia 5 years ago, in 2019, because of political persecution, because since I worked with the finance, since I had some sensitive information, the government decided to go against me personally, and I noticed some surveillance. I noticed some people following me. I lived in Moscow. We worked in Moscow at that time. And I'm going to be honest, I was scared. I got scared, and I think it took me like half a year to make this decision. I felt like something is coming, something is going to happen. And I made this decision to leave the country 5 years ago. And actually, after I left the country in June 2019, in August, on my birthday, they came with the police searchings to my apartment where I lived. So I was actually right. I noticed them following me, and I realized that they want to find where I live, what is exactly the place. And they came to my apartment with police searchings. Unfortunately, people who were renting my room after I left, they had to go through this instead of me. And they took all of their gadgets, all of their cash money. Like, I mean, every time when Russian police comes, like with a raid to your apartment, they take everything from you, all your assets. And
is that for an investigation, or is
like,
it just theft? Did they return the gadgets?
In fact, it's a theft. And I rented out my room to my colleague, and it was a big mistake because he kept a lot of cash in his wardrobe. Because when you live in Russia, he's my colleague from the Anti-Corruption Foundation, and he couldn't keep a lot of money on his bank account, because when you operate in such circumstances, you always risk your bank account to be blocked, to be arrested, which actually happened many times. So he was afraid to keep his money on his bank account, so he preferred to keep all of his savings in a wardrobe, in cash. So they came to that apartment to find me, but they found him and all the cash. And they came after me because they fabricated a criminal case for money laundering against me. So they came to find me, they found some money, okay, a very good deal, money laundering case, we're taking the money for investigation. And that's it, he lost everything, and it was a huge amount. And for some time I felt guilty, but of course it's not my fault, it's the regime operating like that.
And the threats from the regime are real, right? The spectrum from harassment, police beatings, false charges, long-term imprisonment, suspicious disappearances, to overt murders, being shot in the head or thrown off bridges. The full range can exist for anyone who's perceived as a threat.
Yeah, it's getting worse and worse. Like even 5 years ago, it was insane, but still you were not that scared for your life. Today, if you go to protest, you are scared for your life because you can get imprisoned and you can be killed in prison, as we can see right now. That happened to many political prisoners. That happened to Alexei Navalny in February this year. So yes, like they use every possible tool to stop you from protesting against the regime.
Have you made it public where you moved to from Russia?
I didn't have to. I was never a public person. I was never a public activist. I am a financial manager of the organization. Mm-hmm. So I'm not a public figure. You will not see me in our videos or...
I guess the reason I ask is, do you worry that the surveillance can travel outside of Russia?
Surveillance do travel outside of Russia.
So do you feel like you're still being kept tabs on? Or?
I would say, me personally, not much, because I'm not like the head of the organization, and I don't manage like any public projects. But what happened recently, my boss from the Anti-Corruption Foundation, Leonid Volkov, he was attacked in Lithuania and Vilnius, like physically. There was an assassination attempt. A man attacked him with a hammer at his house, at the parking of his house. So even living in Europe right now, we live and we work now in Europe, in Lithuania, you cannot be 100% safe, because if Putin wants to kill you, he'll do it anywhere. And
it happened in the UK.
It happens
multiple times.
Yes. He just has his agents, his spies, and he just can send anyone to any place. It doesn't matter. I personally, with time you feel like adapted to this, and you don't feel scared anymore. It becomes your reality. It becomes your normal. Like somewhere in the back of my mind, I always have this, that they can go against my family. And I always, when I call my mom, for example, early morning, and she doesn't answer my call, first thought that I have in my head that maybe there's a police raid in her apartment. But living like that for 7 years, you take it as something normal, unfortunately, because actually you shouldn't normalize this kind of things. But people get used to these kind of things, and it becomes your life, fortunately.
Does a lot of the courage to operate like that come from Navalny himself? Because I mean, you can only have to watch the documentary to see his courage. And, his statement, I think it was one on the plane where people said, how do you feel coming back to Russia? And he said, I'm very excited to come back to home. I can't remember the exact words, but there's a courage through the whole program. He doesn't show any weakness at all. Did that carry through to everyone who ended up working for him? It was almost like part of being part of the anti-corruption organization that you had to have that courage.
I mean, we don't have this requirement when we have like job openings,
No, of course.
It's not like you must be
But
brave.
Is it infectious?
Of course, you get this inspired from Navalny when you join him and you see like he's so determined, he's so strong, he's so brave, and you're like, I also want to be like that. I'm a part of this, and you feel like I'm not afraid of anything. But also when you decide to join this, I think you're by default you have something like that in you, because you realize that if you go against Putin, you're a threat to the regime and anything can happen. So you understand these risks. But when I joined the Anti-Corruption Foundation, I was 24. So I would say I was more brave. I was like more badass, I would say. Because with the age you get more maybe calmer. But at that time, and I could really feel that we could change something inside the country. And this hope also drives you. And we had big hopes. I joined the organization during the presidential campaign when Alexei Navalny decided to run for president. He decided to participate in those elections. And we had a huge presidential campaign in 2017. And we had like more than 300 employees all over the country. We had offices, like more than 40 offices in every big city of Russia. So we had like a huge organization, and we felt like we're going to change. We're going to change the situation in the country. We're going to fight, and we're going to win. We had this. We were sure about that. And of course, this also gives you a lot of bravery. But now, since the political repression's getting like crazier and crazier, and they arrest every single person who goes to the street, they take their kids from them.
How do they have enough prison cells to keep everybody? I mean, because I saw it at the airport, they were arresting everybody.
Yeah, but they arrest people like for a day or for a couple of days. And of course, like they release everyone after that. When there were mass protests, of course, they cannot keep everyone in prison. But if they notice you at protests several times, and there is surveillance in Moscow, there are cameras everywhere in the streets. So they already know, like, you're a target. If you were at the protest once, then twice, then 3 times, you are a target for them. And if you keep doing that, they will arrest you for way longer, and they fabricate a criminal case against you, and you stay in prison as someone who is a threat to the regime. If it's just like you went there with a crowd just once, it's dangerous, but still not as dangerous as if you're an opposition activist, if you keep doing it all the time.
Can we just frame this for people? Can we just go back a step and help people understand what the reality of life is like in Russia in terms of the ability to live a normal life, start a business, but also the propaganda that's fed from state news, the access people have to content on the internet? What's the reality of life?
Since I left Russia 5 years ago, it's for me more difficult to feel how it feels right now inside Russia. But from what I see now and what I experienced in my life inside the country, you don't encounter any political content, like real political content, if you don't search for it. So if you just have a TV set, as many Russians, like, just come back home from work, they turn on the TV set, and all they see is Russian propaganda 24/7 on every state TV channel. And this is how the regime operates for 25 years. You can find some alternative opinions, some opposition some independent medias. They all exist only on the internet, of course. But you have to be interested in this content. It will not just come to you eventually if you don't look for it. And when living in Russia till the age of 24, I was not well aware of what was going on inside the country. I was like circulating in different circles. I had different environments, so I kind of lived in a parallel dimension. And this never reached me because the government does everything they can to isolate you from this information. So you just live knowing that Putin is a president and probably he'll be a president till he dies. And like, you cannot do anything about it, but you don't even think that you must do something about it because you don't know that there are alternatives. You never hear about those alternatives. Fortunately, I discovered Navalny team. Fortunately, I discovered information about their projects, watched their videos, and I participated in the protest rally in 2017. And that was the moment, like eye-opening moment for me. I saw that huge crowd in the city center of Moscow. And I was like, whoa, something is happening. Something is going on in my country. And I don't even know what's going on. I don't know like why there is such a huge crowd protesting against corruption. And I made some research and I realized that this is huge. This is huge and I want to be a part of this because it is very important. This is how I
So it's by chance. It's by chance.
Personally, for me, yes. Of course, not everyone is like that. Like people don't like what's happening in the country. They search for alternatives. They find it. But people are more aware in big cities, of course. I would say in small towns, it's not a priority for majority to think about politics, to search for this content. In small towns or in villages, people don't even have internet access. So they just watch TV set and they see what they see, that Russia is the greatest country, that Putin is the greatest president, that everyone in the world, all global West is afraid of Russia. And we have like all the best and they like global West is just collapsing. And of course, eventually people start believing it because they don't hear anything else. And this is the reality of small towns, of villages. Of course, people are more educated in bigger cities. But today, the reality is very brutal. If you don't like something, if you want to express it, even on the internet, you will be punished for that. And the level of punishment is up to death threat. So it's very scary. And those narratives that like Putin has 80% or more support, those narratives, fake narratives that are created by Putin himself, they make people feel isolated. For example, it's complete lie that he has such a huge support. But since he keeps saying that, since some people in the West keep saying that Putin has 80% of support. And regular Russians sitting at home thinking, I don't like Putin, but 80% of people like him. And I'm all alone with this. So if I go to the street, I will be all alone. And of course, I'm going to be arrested for that. So I will just not go. But the majority actually in real life, they don't support the regime. They don't support the war. But they don't know that they're the majority because Putin keeps convincing people, if you don't like this regime, you are all alone in this. No one is going to take your side. And this is very toxic when people keep saying this, that Putin has a lot of support.
It feels like he's built a massive infrastructure of like layers of control and fear, whereby he controls the security apparatus who are routinely arresting and beating and abusing people. So there's like that fear and chilling effect to protest. He's killed journalists. And so there's the chilling effect for anyone who can report on it. But it almost feels like he's rebuilt what existed to some extent in East Berlin, where there's this almost fear and whispering campaign that even if you say something, somebody else might report on you.
Exactly.
So everyone becomes just compliant.
Yes. Unfortunately, this is the reality today, and people are afraid even to discuss like in public places that they don't like the regime. And we had such cases when people were talking in the restaurant and someone at the next table called the police because they heard something that they didn't like, and they called the police and told that these guys want to start an opposition movement or go against the regime or something like that. Yes, unfortunately, this is something that is happening today. People are afraid to talk, even like between each other. They prefer to do it like privately at home.
Secret meetings.
Yes. But one of the projects of the Anti-Corruption Foundation, which I'm proud of, we created a secure platform on Tor browser for Russian activists, for those who want to communicate, for those who want to operate inside the country. We create a platform for them where they communicate, where they do some projects like hacking some governmental websites. Like we give them tasks and we support them. And for example, to create some leaflets and to put it in the mailboxes of people. Like there are still movements inside the country, but they're so underground, and we try to protect them because it is very dangerous to do anything publicly.
What do you think? You say that 80% is the number that's floated in terms of like support of Putin. What do you think a more accurate number would be?
It's a very good question. No one has real numbers because, as I mentioned, you cannot just publicly say that you don't support the regime, and all like data of polling agencies, like we don't know if we can trust this data, because today if you call any Russian and ask, do you support Putin? Do you support the war?
They're just going to say yes.
They whether say yes or they just hang up the phone because they're afraid to talk to you. But we think that not more than 10% is like core support of Putin regime, like real supporters, like those who really like the president and like the war and everything that is happening. The problem is that the majority is not well educated about the situation. They are not aware of the situation, or they're apolitical. They don't see alternative. So they say, okay, let it be Putin, because there is no alternative. And if people say like that, do they support the regime or not? How can we judge like if they are supporters or not, if they're just desperate? So it's hard to have any real numbers, but we still try to collect some numbers. And we have our independent polling agency at the Anti-Corruption Foundation. We make calls to Russians, but we don't ask these type of questions directly. We have different kind of questions, but still we can understand some reality. For example, we ask, what if there is a surplus in Russian budget? Where would you like to spend this money? On educational system, on healthcare system, on military, on the war in Ukraine? And we see that people don't say we want to spend this money on the war.
Well, that was that brilliant moment in the documentary where he was at the rally and the guy asked him a question, what's your view on Ukraine? What should we do with Ukraine? And his answer was, do you want to pay for the war?
Yeah, exactly.
And everybody just said no.
Yeah. People don't want this war in Russia, actually. And this is what we see from our surveys. But no one today in reality of the wartime, no one will give you real numbers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, I think it was Alex Gladstein who first coined it to me that Russia is really nothing more than a mafia state. It's a mafia.
Of course, it's a mafia.
It's a mafia that runs it. It's not really ideologically driven. Any ideology or proud kind of strong-arm Russian resistance is really just public relations for what is a mafia state which controls all the natural resources and routinely steals those resources and the wealth from those resources from the Russian people.
I mean, if there was any ideology, then there would be lines of Russian men who wants to go to the war and protect Russia, if there was any really working ideology in Russia. But what we see, that Putin cannot find people who want to go to the war. He has to draft men from prisons or forces regular men to go, and no one wants. People escape Russia just in order not to go to the war. So there is no strong ideology for the regime. It's a mafia, and Putin himself, he comes from KGB. So he and his inner circle are just his friends from his childhood, from his past. He surrounds himself with criminals like himself.
We should probably go back a step also, just for, I mean, people who haven't done their Russian history, and they probably heard of the oligarchs, and particularly if they're a Chelsea fan, they would have heard of Roman Abramovich.
Yeah.
But maybe have not fully understand what an oligarch is and what happened after Yeltsin when Putin came in. And I mean, you coined it in your documentary, The Big Bribe.
We have an amazing movie released by the Anti-Corruption Foundation. You can watch it on our website, and I think it has English subtitles as well.
It's dubbed in English.
Dubbed?
Yeah, I was watching it last night. Putin's Palace. Have you seen it?
No, I've not seen
Putin's
it.
Palace is a different one.
Oh, is it a different one?
Putin's Palace is a great investigation that exposes Putin's corruption at its best, like his palace and crazy assets that he has. But I'm talking about different one. We released the movie about how it all started, how Putin started. That it all started with Yeltsin collaborating with the Russian oligarchs, and eventually they pushed Putin to power. They made it happen, unfortunately. And we had at that moment we had another great candidate that was Boris Nemtsov, and the big opposition leader.
He was popular?
He was popular, but unfortunately Putin was elected at that moment, and eventually Boris Nemtsov was killed. He was shot in the city center of Moscow, next to the Kremlin. And what's funny is that there is still investigation that says that we don't have cameras at that night were not working in that street, because we have cameras everywhere at every corner in Moscow, but at that very bridge where he was killed, camera was not working. So
it's like the Epstein cameras.
Yes. So unfortunately, Putin happened, and God knows what could happen if Boris Nemtsov could win that election. So Russia could be now a democratic country. But unfortunately, what's happening now is Russia is completely authoritarian regime. And it all started 25 years ago.
So when Navalny first started campaigning for running for president, it's obviously very difficult to run as an opposition in Russia. They make it very difficult, right?
He participated in opposition movements long ago. I will not even remember dates. It was all his career was about that. But the most significant one started in 2013 when he tried to run for mayor of Moscow, and he won a second place. But it was obviously the result. The guy who won, he's Putin's friend, of course, and there is a lot of reason to believe that it was faked. The result was faked, but the fact that Navalny got a lot of votes made Putin realize that Navalny is a real threat to the regime, and especially the fact that after that campaign, Navalny and his brother got a fabricated criminal case, and his brother was arrested, and Navalny, his brother was arrested and put to prison, and Alexei Navalny, he had a home arrest, but he was manipulated through his brother's imprisonment a lot. If you keep campaigning, if you keep going against the regime, we're going to put your brother to solitary confinement or something like that. So it was a very strong manipulation tool for Putin. This is how the big political career started. And only once Navalny tried to run for president. It was in 2018. but it was not like he tried to run for president. He tried to get registered for those elections because you cannot even get registered. So he tried to become a candidate, first of all, and then run for president. But of course, they didn't allow us to register him as a candidate. They didn't want to see his name in the ballot together with Putin because they realized that Navalny was going to get a lot of votes, and they couldn't allow that to happen.
The humble bee, a keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. It's a tough pill, knowing the Earth is better without us. But imagine if instead, we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions and becoming the solution. Iron mines the world's most responsible currency the right way. Because the future depends on it.
So how does the democratic process in Russia work?
Democratic process?
Yeah, I mean, it's democratic by name, but what is the actual process? Because there is a perceived perception of democracy for some people within Russia, because you go to the ballot box and there's multiple options of people you vote for. But if you want to be real opposition, what is the process?
They don't even allow you to register your political party, first of all. We tried 9 times, and we just couldn't. They stop you in every possible way. You must collect signatures from your supporters. Like, the whole process is not physically possible to make, because you have to collect an insane amount of signatures in a very limited time. And the whole thing is created in order to stop you if you're an opposition leader. This is what they did against Navalny. They just said that like some percentage of signatures we collected were fake, or people were already dead, or like they didn't recognize some like certain percent of signatures. And they do it against everyone who tried to get registered. But in the case of Navalny, we did everything perfectly well during the campaign. It was brilliant. But since he had that old criminal case with his brother, the fabricated criminal case, they told that he cannot participate in the elections as a criminal. But we don't have such an article in the Constitution. You cannot participate in the elections only if you are in prison. But if you have a criminal case, it doesn't stop you from participating. So it was completely illegal that they refused him from participation. But of course, after they refused, we organized some protest rallies against those elections. We invited people to ban those elections, not to go to vote. And like many people went to protest. But unfortunately, the reality is like that. If you go to vote during the presidential elections, you will see the name of Putin and 3 names that you never heard about. Because none of those candidates ever had a campaign. None of them ever had a presidential, like any plans published for the future of the country, you know. And you go to vote, you see Putin and 3 names you never heard about. And some people are like, I don't know anyone except for Putin, and they just vote for him just because there is no alternative. They never heard about those people. Or they clearly understand that those people, if they're in the ballot, they're all Putin supporters. I mean, they're all ally. It's all fake. The entire election is fake. Because Putin already made that mistake. Before in the past, he allowed some fake opposition, not fake, but opposition who is like kind of allies with Putin, but not much. But he allowed them to participate. He allowed their names to be in the ballot. And those people got too many votes. And he didn't like it. So he decided this time not to risk that much. The last elections, it was just ridiculous. Yeah.
How does the parliament work in Russia? Are there opposition parties, and are they allowed to exist even with minority support, or is the parliament a single party?
There are parties, but they're all
Allied.
Yes. You cannot. If you try to go against even like people who are inside those parties, but they are against Putin's party, they very fast get kicked out. Very fast. So we try to promote those people. We know that like this guy, he's in this party, but he's anti-Putin, like himself personally. We promote those people to win some local elections, but unfortunately, what we see is that very fast they are kicked out from their jobs. Yeah.
So when Navalny's, even if he wasn't allowed to run, he still campaigned. He still had rallies, and very on his focus was always on corruption.
Yeah.
And he always referred to them as the thieves in government who were stealing from you. That was a very direct strategy.
Yes, but because corruption is the core of the regime itself. Corruption in Russia is the foundation of the regime. Like everything is circulating around money for Putin. And this is how the system exists. Putin allows oligarchs and like everyone else around him to steal a lot of money from the budget, and they allow him to be a president. So it's like they have this deal, and Putin uses them as his wallets. So they only all they care about is money, and they steal a lot from the Russian budget. And if you check out the YouTube channel of the Navalny organization of the Anti-Corruption Foundation, we have several YouTube channels. One of them is where we publish our anti-corruption investigations. So anti-corruption investigation work is one of our biggest projects that we have. And we do a really great job, like showing all those palaces, yachts, private jets. And you've seen the movie Putin's Palace.
Yes.
So probably you were surprised by some things that Putin has in his house. Like it's insane, like golden toilets and like toilet brushes that cost like insane amounts of money. And we have many investigations about Putin's inner circle because all of them have this kind of assets. And we do a lot of anti-corruption work because we believe that all they care about is corruption, and most of the crimes they do in order to keep their money. So corruption must be cleaned in the country. This issue must be reduced, and after that we can talk about everything else.
Well, I think the thing that grabbed me the most was the statement that Putin might be the richest person in the world.
No one knows.
Yeah.
No one knows how rich he is.
But he could be.
Very, very likely he is the richest man in the world. But the way he keeps his money, as I said, he has his wallets. His wallets are like oligarchs around him. So it's very hard to count how much he has in the end. But like what we see, like his palaces and everything else inside, and he has like a personal train, crazy yachts everywhere in the world. Probably he is like insanely rich.
I do wonder, you think about someone like Elon Musk and the wealth he has, but he has freedom. Mm-hmm. He could travel pretty much anywhere in the world, on his jets, go anywhere on holiday. But when you're
and you're Putin and you go to North Korea.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. You can go to North Korea, you can go to Iran, you can go to China, but you can't really live a free man's existence.
He's very isolated, and many people believe that he got insane also because of this, because of his isolation. He's isolated, and especially during the COVID time.
The big table.
Yeah. The table pictures were really funny, and he's isolated because he realizes that many people want to kill him, and he's afraid of death, and he has a lot of doctors who control his health, and of course he's isolated from everyone. And you go crazy. You're isolated, living in your palace and watching your own propaganda TV. Like, of course, you would be a crazy old dictator in the end.
Because you believe your own bullshit.
Of course, yeah, that is actually what happened to Putin. It is obvious that he got tricked by his own propaganda machine, because he doesn't have, like, he talks about it a lot, and people know about it. It's a well-known fact that he doesn't use internet. So, like, all the information he receives from his inner circle on the paper. They bring papers, making reports about everything that's happening in the country. So, of course, they will not report that the level of corruption is insane, everything is collapsing. And, of course, they say that our military is great, all systems work correctly. And he believed in these lies. And he believed that he could actually conquer Ukraine. He could start this war and win it just because.
3 days.
Yes, in 3 days he believed in that, and he got tricked by his own propaganda, because he's watching his own TV, and on TV they say Putin is the greatest president of the world, and everyone is afraid of Putin. And it's not the first time in history that it happens to dictators. This is how he lives his life, isolated. And by the way, several days ago there was an investigation published by, I think, Important Stories media as well, about Putin kids. They found Putin's sons that he has together with his, like, wife. It's not an official wife, a woman he lives with. Maybe they got married secretly, I don't know. So they found his 2 sons, and they learned a lot about their lifestyle, that they live isolated as well. And like the way they live, that they don't interact with real people from, like, outside of this bubble, is just insane.
You said a minute ago that Putin's kind of a little paranoid about health. There was a rumor a while ago, I don't know how much truth there was to it, that he was pretty unwell. Do you think that's what do you
Cancer,
think?
right? They thought he had cancer.
Yeah.
Because he was all puffy. And you get that's what happens in, like, late stage cancer. They fill you with steroids and it puffs you up.
Also, it happens when you use too much fillers.
Oh, you think it's like he's
course.
vain?
Of course. Yeah, you can see that. And one of the latest videos I watched with him, I saw that he had, like, his eyebrows dyed with, like, color. So yeah, and it's
just too much Botox.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
And we think, and I personally think that he doesn't have cancer, or he's not that sick. Because
I hope it's Botox.
There are also investigations that show that he doesn't have too many doctors around him who treat cancer.
Okay.
There are some doctors who control his health, but if he was, like, deadly sick, he would have way more doctors. But it's a fact that there is a man in his team, in Putin's team, who goes with him everywhere to, like, some international events, and that man carries a suitcase, and he collects his poop after Putin. Yes, everywhere.
Putin's pooping.
So yes, because so no one can take a sample and check his health.
Well, I remember reading a story about the CIA finding out. I think it was someone in Russia finding out they was very sick by, like, literally collecting the sewage out of his house and finding out he had cancer. So they do that.
Yeah, they do that. They do that, and of course, he has such a person who.
There's so many things you have to worry about in these scenarios. Like any bodyguard who turns could put a bullet in your head. Any chef who cooks for you could poison you.
Of course, and just imagine if we publish such videos of his palace. We have all the pictures from the inside of the palace. It means that people who work there, the workers who, like builders, architects, they leak information. And Putin realized that after Putin's Palace movie was released, Putin realized that like, he cannot trust anyone. Anyone can leak anything from his personal life. So, of course, he gets paranoid about everything, and he isolates himself as much as he can.
You seen that video? Oh, I'm trying to remember who it's with, where they have the champagne. him and Putin, and who is it? And they tap the glasses, and Putin's looking at the other guy to like drink it first. Who was it? Was that even in North Korea? You should search that up. It's so funny. But like, does he have somebody who has to eat his meal before he eats it to test it? How does he know he's not going to be poisoned himself?
I don't know, but probably there is someone who tests his food.
I just think it's a weird way to live.
But he has golden toilet brush.
Fair enough. I wouldn't mind.
Is it worth?
I'd like a golden toilet brush.
Is it worth living like that?
The corruption. So the corruption that exists, because obviously you work for the anti-corruption organization, and Navalny's anti-corruption organization. How much of it is just because of poor governance, or how much of it is to maintain control? Because obviously at the top level, at the oligarchs and his main goons, they're probably allowed to be as corrupt as they want and to steal as much as they want, and that's the way he keeps control and keeps them happy. And we know it's the same with Maduro in Venezuela, that he has to keep his goons happy as well. But because of that, does it mean there's like a lack of strong institutions? So just people feel like at every level, whether it's local police,
yeah, of course,
everyone just feels like they can just steal.
Of course, and corruption kills. It was one of our slogans.
Okay.
Because there are so many cases when, like, for example, it happened in one of cities of Russia when the shopping mall center got on fire, and many kids died when watching the movie in a cinema there in the shopping mall. Just because the owner of the shopping mall paid for services who checked the fire alarm system. He paid in order not to go through the annual check, and it got on fire and the system didn't work well, and many people died just because of corruption. And like, there are such cases in Russia, and it's a well-known fact that you can pay for many things to policemen, especially on the roads. You can pay and like keep going. And some people think that it's not a big deal. Okay, I gave a bribe. It's a small bribe. It doesn't mean anything. But if you look at a bigger scale, like to what results it lead, if everything corrupted at every level, everything collapses. All institutions, they collapse eventually in the country.
Yeah, it goes back to that debate, that kind of like full anarcho-capitalist debate where let the market regulate itself. But if the market regulates itself, then people can cut corners, and there's certain things like building regulations. Well, no, there was it was Rogan when he had who was it? Who was the guy? He's the conservative commentator, the one who blocked me.
I don't know. There's a few.
There's a few. There's a few. The gay guy he's a gay Republican commentator. He was caught up in this Tim Pool thing.
I know who you mean, but I can't think of his name.
Rubin, Jeff Rubin?
I don't know.
I forget his name. I'm so bad with
names. What
names.
happened?
Well, so firstly, have you seen this whole thing with Tim Pool and Tenet Media? Yeah. So we should talk about that as well. But
not
Dave Rubin.
Yeah.
Dave Rubin, that's it. So Dave Rubin was discussing this with Rogan, where he was saying, if you're a house builder, you want to sell houses, you're going to build the best house possible because, you would survive by reviews. And if you're not respected as a house builder, if your houses fall apart and kill people, people won't buy your houses from them. But Rogan's reply to this was, but if you let the market regulate itself, we know what people are like. They will cut corners. And so it's like, it's the debate. There's a solid debate to be had about amount of regulation. What is good regulation? What is bad regulation? What is too much regulation? What's too little regulation? It happened in China when the earthquakes happened in China. Lots of people were killed by buildings collapsing because they didn't build the houses to a regulation standard. Ai Weiwei, the artist, went out to this area of China and they went and retrieved lots of the steel girders that were used to construct them. And he actually had the display here in London. He built artwork out of these. And so it's a really interesting debate, but I just feel like, I fully understand the anarcho-capitalist debate. Let the market regulate itself. Too much regulation is, holds back and is too bureaucratic and too much red tape. But at the same time, if you can be corrupt or cut corners, people will. It's like human nature for some people just to be totally greedy.
Yeah. Well, this issue of corruption is not just something that destroys Russia inside the country. One of the issues is also that Putin brings corruption abroad. He corrupts people in the West. He corrupts leaders in the West so he can, and his elites, his inner circle, they can keep their assets abroad. And there are many investigations that prove that. And this is a very complex thing because since democratic institutions in Europe, in the West, they're transparent. Their salaries of the state workers are transparent, and the levels of corruption are very low. And Putin says, I can give you way more money if you help me to keep my money in your banks or my yacht in your waters or something like that. And he brings corruption abroad, and it spoils also democracies.
Well, it backfired with the war after Chelsea. With Chelsea, Roman Abramovich was forced to sell Chelsea Football Club. They didn't let him. Where did the money go?
I don't actually know.
Did the UK government just keep that? But you saw a number of the super yachts that were owned by Russian oligarchs were seized.
Yes, it's very important that people who bring corruption abroad, they must be sanctioned personally. They must be targets, not the entire country, but there must be personal sanctions. And this is one of our projects as well. We prove that those Russian oligarchs, they keep their assets abroad, but they register them on their kids' names or wives or some friends, relatives, whatever. And we prove the chain, we prove that there is connection between those people. And we ask the Western authorities, you must sanction those people, those kids or whoever else, because there is a tight connection between those oligarchs and those people actually having those assets in your countries. And this work is one of the hardest because European authorities, they're very confused. They say why should we take assets, freeze assets of those people if they are not criminals, they're friends or kids. So we negotiate a lot, and our lawyers send a lot of reports to different authorities, European authorities, demanding the seizure. We want their assets to be frozen and taken away, because otherwise it will be very convenient for Putin to keep operating this way.
Well, we have laws here now, don't we? If you benefit from, what do they call it? It's the ill-gotten gains.
Oh, I don't know about this.
Yeah, so if you're a proven criminal, if you're convicted of fraud, drug dealing, they will, not only can you be prosecuted and sent to jail, you can have your property seized as well.
But what if you have properties and you have a daughter and your daughter has a boyfriend and those properties are under his name?
That can still happen. I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was a drug dealer, but his wife had to give up her properties because the proceeds of crime.
So
Is it the Proceeds of Crime Act?
Very often they just get divorced. They get divorced and keep.
They'll still take it. No,
Okay.
it's a proceeds of crime.
Yeah, the Peterborough drug dealer's wife was ordered to pay back the money from ill-gotten gains.
Is there a house involved in that one?
I'm not sure. I was just looking at the Chelsea Football Club thing. So that was sold for £2.5 billion, and it was promised to go to a independent foundation to give money to Ukrainian war victims. But at the moment, it's just frozen in the bank account, not gone to anyone.
Should have put it in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But anyway, we try to highlight this. We try to raise awareness of the global West that those people must be sanctioned because they collaborate with the regime, and you cannot sanction the entire country, all Russians, but allow them to bring corruption abroad and just live their best life and continue enjoying this.
Well, there's a lot of Russians here in London. There's a lot of property owned by Russians here in London. And I'm certain there were property sieges at the start of the Ukraine war as well. Because there seemed to be this campaign that it certainly felt like for a month or two that anyone associated with the regime would have their assets frozen. I don't even know what's happened to Roman Abramovich now, but I think strategically they started targeting the oligarchs, didn't they? Because they thought the influence they would have over Putin to end the war, it didn't seem to work. Didn't Abramovich get involved in some kind of negotiations, and then I thought there was an attempt to poison him as well. Do you remember that?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, he did. I'm sure he had some like meeting on a boat, and he ended up getting some like weird rash. Yeah, it's nuts stuff. Absolutely nuts.
Yes, oligarchs must be targeted, and oligarchs are those who can affect the situation in the country, because they are the ones that collaborate with Putin like closely, and they are happy while they have access to their money. If they don't have access to their money, they don't like Putin anymore, and it's very important to remember about that.
Yeah, but I wonder how much they can stop him. I mean, if you look at Maduro in Venezuela, which is a tiny little isolated country that has had significant sanctions on it, and Maduro has managed to retain control by seizing assets from Venezuelans, by the rumored work with the militant groups who traffic drugs.
Yeah.
There's ways that Maduro has been able to maintain power. I mean, Putin's in an entirely different situation in that he has a strong relationship with North Korea, with Russia, with Iran, with China, that he has, Russia itself has significant resources and assets that he's able to sell into those markets. So trying to financially squeeze him has not worked.
Yeah, because there must be a way for those oligarchs how to get out of this situation. Because if they're just sanctioned, they just unite around Putin because, okay, we cannot have anything abroad, and what are we supposed to do? So we will stay inside Russia and we will just unite around Putin.
Is that what's happened?
This is what's happening. And we also negotiate with Western authorities about some scenario where like an oligarch or businessman who is sanctioned, if he stops supporting the regime publicly, if he says that I don't support it or I'll support Ukraine, like if he does something to prove it, he must have a way out of sanctions. And this way it will like split these elites, and it could be a working scenario. But just sanctioning them, they're just punished by Western authorities, and what next? Of course, they just unite around the regime.
The problem with sanctions, though, is they only ever really punish the citizens of the country, never really the leaders. The leaders always have ways around it.
Of course, they for example, Putin collaborates with leaders of other authoritarian regimes, and this is how they keep operating. But regular Russians suffer from sanctions in many different ways. For example, there is no SWIFT working in Russia anymore. You cannot transfer money from abroad to Russia and from Russia abroad. Like, there is no way to do that. And like, why regular Russians have to deal with this? They say that they try to stop Putin from like trading, from supporting, from fueling the war. But in reality, regular Russians have to use Bitcoin in order to operate, have to find ways how to live their regular lives, or traveling ban. Like, the Russians are not issued some visas to travel anymore. How does it harm the regime?
It doesn't. Well, it's like we spoke yesterday about certain sportsmen and women who've been essentially sanctioned. Russians not allowed to compete at, say, tennis events or in the Olympics, and these are talented individuals who've probably trained their whole lives, who want to compete in sports, and they're being personally punished for something that Putin's done, which is having no effect. I mean, you can ban Russia from the Olympics, and it makes no difference.
It is crazy because sport and politics is a very big separate topic, but Yes, I know athletes. I know their lifestyle. That they train since they were born. All their lives. They just want to compete at some big events, and then they're just banned because Putin did some mistakes, and like it's a very difficult ethical question. Because if you go to compete as an athlete, do you represent your country? Does it mean that you support the regime inside the country? Like this can be debated. And I personally,
I think you represent your country, but your country and your regime are two different things.
yes, I agree with that. And of course, I am on the side of athletes. They dedicated their lives to that, and now they're just banned, and it's very upsetting. But unfortunately, everything that is related to Russian flag today is banned everywhere in the world. So I understand why it's happening.
So do you as a Russian then do you feel persecuted yourself?
When I use Russian?
No, as a Russian, when you're traveling abroad, whenever you're in other countries, do you feel like people maybe side-eye you a bit, think of you differently just because you're a Russian? Do you feel persecuted for it?
Of course, it happens here and there and everywhere, not only like in the place where I live. It happens sometimes. Just recently I was traveling and a woman, I think it was in Switzerland, I was just crossing the border. I had a connection flight and a woman there threw my passport at me like that. She threw it at me. And
because you invaded Ukraine personally.
Probably, or I was gonna go right there to Ukraine from Switzerland. I don't know what she was thinking about. But like some people express their irritation when they hear me speak in Russian, but I don't. I would not say that it's a huge issue right now, but there are people, maybe poorly educated people, who don't understand very well how it works. That there are Russians who don't support the regime. Not all Russians support it, but it's very upsetting. Personally for me, and I take these kind of things very close to my heart, because when you fight against the Russian regime for 7 years and they still hate you for being Russian, and you have to explain I'm not that bad, please listen to my story. Of course you're not gonna do that, but you feel a bit upset after such cases. But fortunately there are more people who understand, and I very much love when people express it to me, that I understand the situation. I understand that not all Russians support this, and if you're Russian, doesn't mean that you support Putin. And I understand that it's just a political situation. It's not Russians.
So with Navalny, when he was campaigning, trying to get onto the ballot, trying to affect change, did he have a genuine belief that he would be able to depose of Putin, remove Putin? Did he have a belief that could happen? And did he believe that would come through the democratic process, or did he think it would be more kind of revolution? The pressure.
Navalny tried to participate in the fair elections.
Yeah.
So it was not like a revolutionary method. It was like...
But he wasn't allowed to go on the ballot.
Yeah. Eventually he wasn't. But when he was trying, it was his idea. I want to be an honest candidate. I have a presidential program, and he was the only candidate with a program. Putin doesn't have a program. He just gives some promises, but there is no real program that Putin has. If you go to our website, you will find a program of Navalny of that period for the future of the country. And he worked on that program together with brilliant minds in all fields like economy, education. He created a real program. So, of course, he wanted to participate in fair elections and with a real program affect some changes in the country. He didn't want to become a president and then to make chaotic steps. He had a real plan. And we believe that...
genuine belief it could happen.
Of course.
And what did he believe the method would be? Because look, based on everything you've said today, even if he got on the ballot, even if he'd had the majority of votes, they would have lied. They would have falsified the results. Even if they couldn't falsify the results, Putin would have... I just don't see any scenario where Putin would go, yeah, do you know what? you're right, I've lost.
Yeah, of course.
So like that transition of power, just I can't see a scenario where that happens.
Of course, Putin would never allow anyone else to win. But even like taking the second place or third place, it means a lot. It gives everyone in the country understanding there is an alternative. Maybe I should take a look at this guy. Who is he? Like, what's his program? And eventually it will lead to some steps. It will change the situation, because even having this presidential campaign 2017, 2018, when we opened offices in all big cities of Russia, we had 2 or more employees in each office, and they were doing their local work in their regions. That affected political situation in Russia significantly. It was the first time in the history of modern Russia when real politics happened inside the country. After that period, Russians realized there is an alternative, and that was a significant shift in people's minds, because before Navalny did that, people were confused, like there is no one, only Putin. And that's his participation in that campaign gave people hope, which is very important. People started to protest against the regime, like very actively. So even like not winning those elections or not even being a candidate on the ballot, the result that we achieved was amazing. People in regions, there were protests in regions, in small regions of Russia, where thousands of people went to the streets. It never happened before in the modern history. So the shift was significant even from that step. So if he was registered as a candidate, the shift could be even bigger in people's minds, which is very important, because since people are affected by propaganda machine, we should first of all fight this. Like, we should give people hope. We should show them that we can change something, and your actions can change the situation in the country. Go and do something, and there will be some results, and there will be better future. Even inspiring people to do something is already a big achievement for us.
So that was why it was so important after he recovered from the poisoning to return to Russia.
Of course, because he could see during the presidential campaign that there is a lot of support that he had. And during the campaign, we opened many offices, and we decided to maintain the offices even after the campaign, because we realized that people, like our supporters, those who worked with us during the campaign, they can continue doing local work on the ground, doing something against their local authorities, against like local corruption. We decided to maintain the entire chain because we realized that we are a big power and we have a lot of supporters. And Navalny knew that if he goes back to Russia, he still has all of those people around in everywhere in the country. And he's not just alone. He has this huge network.
That was the saddest part of the documentary, and like anyone listening, if they haven't, they should go watch the Navalny documentary. I can't remember what channel I watched it on.
It's HBO Max.
No, something else in the UK. My son got it up for us, but definitely we'll try and we'll put some links out for it. But it was so sad. I mean, you've watched it now. Mm-hmm. It's a brilliant movie. I think it was like 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. It won an Oscar.
It won an Oscar.
Yeah, it's brilliantly made. The pacing is really good. And there's this real hope when he gets on the plane to go back to Russia. And then there's a moment where the plane isn't allowed to land. And it circles, and you're like, oh. And eventually it lands, and he's going through the airport. And even in the airport, you're like, there's hope, there's hope, there's hope.
Yes.
He gets to passport control, and those goons turn up and say, you come with me, and won't let the lawyer go. And you're just like, oh.
Yes.
That's it. In that moment, they crushed it. And, I'm watching this as a documentary. You, as somebody who worked for Navalny with all that hope, the moment where he's arrested and taken away and sent to, is it penal colony 2?
Yes, yeah. Yes.
My assumption is the strategically there is they just wanted to kill momentum and hope. Because
of course,
if you kill him, you create a martyr. But if you take him away to a site, is it in Siberia? Is it Siberian?
No, it's not Siberia. I mean, he was put in one prison, then he was sent to another one, and then to the prison like way up to the north. They isolated him completely in the end.
Out of sight and out of mind. It's an English saying, out of sight, out of mind. So if you can't see it, you can't think about it. So
yes,
you kill him, he's a martyr, but he's out there. He has no momentum.
Yes.
And is that what they did? They just killed the momentum.
Yes, at the moment when Navalny was on the plane going back to Russia, I remember how I was like facing that moment. I was at home and I was like, everyone was like that, like so nervous. We were all watching the news, like waiting for what was going to happen. And hundreds, thousands of people went there to that airport to meet him. And of course, they don't want... the government couldn't allow this to happen, that Navalny comes as a hero and thousands of people meeting him and greeting him. Of course, they didn't want those pictures to be in the media. It's like, it looks too good. And they sent a plane to another airport and they blocked all the roads. So this crowd couldn't go to that one. So they wanted a picture of Navalny coming back to an empty airport and no one meeting him. But still, people managed to get to that airport and they met his wife. They couldn't meet Navalny because he was immediately arrested. And it's funny because he was put to a prison cell at the police station. And like the very next day, there was a court in the police station that sentenced him. So they didn't even bring him to the real court. They just brought judges to the police station.
What was the charges? Extremist organization?
No. That arrest was it was under different charges, which was ridiculous. That I told you about. I think yesterday that there was an old fabricated criminal case that I mentioned before against him and his brother, and. After that case, Navalny was like, he had to check in at the police station like every month or something like that. Like you.
Oh, have you not heard this?
I don't think
this
so.
This is nuts, right?
Yeah. So after that criminal case, Navalny was forced to go every month to the police station to check in because as a criminal, you have to show up all the time. And after Navalny was poisoned, he was sent to Germany to get his treatment, and he was in coma. And when he came back to Russia, he was arrested at the airport under this very criminal case. And the reason was like, you were not coming to the police station to check in. And he was like, I'm sorry, I was in coma.
Yeah,
and
you poisoned me.
You poisoned me. You tried to kill me. No, like you were supposed to do that. And they arrested him under that case. But then they fabricated another case, then another one. Then they labeled him as a terrorist. They put his name on a terrorist list. And
but your organization is an extremist
organization. So he was eventually he was also charged for organizing an extremist foundation.
20 years was he sentenced to?
I think something like that. But there were like several cases, like different sentences. So like the entire thing was huge. But anyway, even if it was less, of course, Putin was not going to release him even after.
I think it's probably really hard for us to understand what that's like in Russia, because to have that level of control, not only do you have to have control of the police, the military, but you have to have control of the courts, the judges. So the judges just have to be corrupt. The charges have to be corrupt. They have to be prosecuted corrupt. The lawyers.
Even doctors at that clinic. Do you remember in the movie?
Of course, because... they fucked up the killing of him. Let's be honest, they fucked it up. They just didn't get it right, but they can't overtly kill him, and so they need the poison to go away. They try and wash his underpants, and then they meme it all afterwards. But even to the point of the media, and that was one of the bits I found most interesting was the media in Russia, where they would discuss Navalny, and all they would do was criticize him and say, "Oh, he's involved in homosexual orgies and this and that," and so. But you try and understand the mindset of these people coming to work. Is it out of fear or is it out of greed? Are these people who are the media faces on Russian TV? Is it because they're fearful of not being critical of Navalny, or they're paid to be critical? But
it's their job. It's like they already...
we're just doing my job.
But I think that if you have to do it, like if you have to work as a Russian propagandist, you eventually have to believe in all the things you're saying. Otherwise, I cannot imagine, how do you sleep at night if you don't believe in this that you're talking about?
I think I don't know, weakness of individuals, lack of courage. I think these people know. I just think they haven't.
You know that all of those propagandists, they have assets abroad.
Of course they do.
And they all talk bad about West. Talk on the Russian TV. They say that West is an enemy, and then they have their palaces
because their
in the
minds
Western
are
countries.
corrupted, and
Of course.
their bank balances are corrupted, and they lack no courage or conviction. They don't stand for anything. I just think they're just fucking bad people.
They're bad people, of course. I forgot your question.
Well, so I mean, then going back to the documentary, it just gets so sad because you have this moment at the end where they show him in the prison cell, and I text you last night, or was it this morning? I was watching it. I don't know if you noticed this, but he's a good looking man, right? He's a really good looking man. He is funny. I mean, he's a funny guy.
He is very funny.
He's articulate. He's like I said, he's like a statesman. He's like,
of course, he's very charismatic.
I kept thinking he's like the Russian Kennedy. Like, he's just a very charismatic guy. I believed if I had an opportunity to meet him, I would just be in awe of him. Like probably you were working for him, and you talked about, how he made you believe in yourself, and and the things the doubts you had, But you get to this moment at the end, and like when he came out of hospital in the wheelchair, he looked weak, but he recovers. He goes to wherever he was in Germany or Switzerland, wherever. Germany, he recovers. He gets back running. He gets back to himself. You see him in the interviews again. He looks great. But that last shot of him in the prison cell, where you see him at the bars, and he looks weak, and his hair's been shaven. He just looks a broken man. They took him away. They broke him.
No, I wouldn't agree here. He was never broken.
He looked broken, but physically.
I mean, yes, they tried to break him in many ways. They even tried to poison him in prison. Doctors thought that they add something to his food because he constantly had some health issues. But if you Google the last video of Navalny, one day before his murder, he was making jokes. There was another court in prison, and he was talking to a judge, and he was making jokes, and he was he was never he didn't look physically broken. He looked really healthy, and he was making jokes. And the next day he was murdered, and they tried to tell us that he was very sick and he probably died out of some disease. But you can see that he was healthy. And the day before several days before his murder, his mother visited him, and she said that he was
she's a badass.
Of course.
Do you see the stuff with his mom? So what was it? They wouldn't return the body.
Yes, after his murder, for a long while, they were refusing to give the body to his mother.
She wouldn't have it.
She was fighting for his body, and they, of course, they didn't want to have big funerals. They didn't want crowds to come to his grave to bring flowers, and they were forcing her to bury him silently somewhere. We will give the body if you agree on our terms, or we will bury him right here at this prison in the backyard. And that prison is located in the middle of nowhere. You can hardly get there. You should go by train, then by car, then it's far in the north. And of course, people will not be able even to visit his grave. And his mother, of course, she didn't agree on those terms, and she was fighting for his body to be released. And it was a big campaign, and it was not only his mother, many people, and those celebrities, Russian celebrities in exile, many people joined it, and we were demanding to give the body to his mother. And also even talking from the perspective of Putin supporting traditional values. How about giving the body of a son to his mother to bury him? How about this value? Because Putin always talks about religion, and he tries to build this image of traditional religious country, and at the same time he doesn't give the dead body to his mother. So of course we appealed to this to these narratives, to traditional values, like the body must be given to the family. Like, what the hell are you doing? And of course, they were trying to hide something. Of course, they didn't want the body to to be investigated. They didn't want to find any signs like how he died. And we still don't know. We still investigate it. And we actually offer some reward for those who will help us inside Russia. Like, if you work in that colony, if you have any information, share that with us. We even offer financial reward for information.
So the official narrative was that he collapsed on a walk. Is that right? In prison and died.
Collapsed
while he was walking.
First, they released some statements about one health issue, then about something else, which immediately means that it's all lie.
Yeah.
And then doctors who investigated, they made a report finally, and it was recently, several weeks ago. So he was killed in February this year, and just several weeks ago, they made a medical report, what's the reason of his death. And they put so many things there, he had issues with this organ, with that organ, and a lot of things. And doctors, independent doctors, normal doctors who read that document, all of them told that, no, it's bullshit. It doesn't work like that. And obviously they're trying to hide something.
So you assume he was poisoned again?
We don't know. Maybe he was poisoned.
What happened to the momentum of the campaign once he was imprisoned, and what's happened to the momentum since he's been killed? Has it, it must have dented it.
I don't know if you know much about what happened in Belarus at this same time, protests in Belarus against Lukashenko, another dictator.
Yeah, that's where the state workers didn't the state workers refuse to work, and there was actually Bitcoin was used to fund the state workers.
There were huge protests in Belarus at the latest elections.
Because Lukashenko stole the election, right?
Yeah, of course, he does it every time, as Putin does. But what I want to say is that Putin likes to take an example of Lukashenko. And the last protests, Lukashenko arrested many people, sentenced many people to many years of prison. And at the protests, he acted very brutal, beating everyone almost to death. Women, men, doesn't matter. And Putin decided to take this example. And the last protest in Russia, Putin behaved like that. Because before that, police was brutal in Russia, but not to that extent. But the last protests in Russia were very brutal. And police was allowed to do whatever they wanted. And there are shocking videos of police forcing people to stand on their knees, beating everyone, the women, old women, doesn't matter. And Putin just acted like that to scare people. And after that experience, after all those images on the internet, you would think twice if you're ready to go out. So momentum, it's not the momentum was lost, because people still they don't like the regime. They want to stop it. But you cannot ask people to go and protest if you realize that people are going to be injured. So we don't encourage people to go out. And working in exile, you don't have a moral right to do that. You go to protest, and I'm going to stay here in a safe place and watch you protesting.
Starbucks.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Navalny had this right to do that because he was in Russia, he was in prison, and he could encourage people to keep fighting. But unfortunately, it's way harder to navigate protests inside the country when you work in exile. And there are not many tools left for Russian opposition organizations who work in exile to do something inside the country.
It feels like there's certainly over the last few years, a large growth in violence and fear here with protests, but not only just with the protesting that you're talking about, with the police brutality. There seems to be it's a lot more dangerous place now to live as a, let's say, I don't want to say vulnerable group. Maybe if you're homosexual, with the anti-gay laws, the lack of protection for women, because there's a lot of violence towards women in the country. Like, it feels like Russia's just become a much more dangerous place than it already was.
Yeah, it's a policy of Russian government to not to do anything against like aggression. They like fuel this aggression in the country, and especially over the past 2 years, the level of aggression in the society increased like insanely, and you can often see in the media videos how like someone is beaten in the street, like a girl with pink hair with short haircut is beaten because probably she's LGBT or anything else, and people feel that they're allowed to behave like that and nothing's going to happen to them. They see it every day in the news. The war is happening. It's allowed to go and kill Ukrainians. So I can do whatever I want and I'm not going to be punished. So people just, I mean, those bad people who were before like behaving more or less, now they feel like they can do whatever they want. And unfortunately, you can see many cases like that in the news.
So where is the campaign against Putin now? Because obviously he's nullified the threat from Navalny himself by killing him. The anti-corruption organization you have still exists, but it feels like the only chance for real change needs to come from within Russia. But how do you mobilize the Russians to do this? The population itself.
So you're asking which button is gonna work? Like which buttons are we gonna?
More like what now? Like,
yeah, I understand the question.
Yeah, no, if you had the button, you would press it. But like, what can you do now? Because I mean, the chilling effect from Navalny is anybody else who? I mean, are there any other potential leaders who are putting their head up and saying, "I will take on Putin"? Because they know what's going to happen. They're going to face harassment, fabricated charges, potentially poisoning, beatings, murder. That's what you face as anyone who wants to be a political opposition.
There are many brilliant people amongst Russian opposition movements, and I don't know if anyone of them have ambitions to become next president, but I have a lot of hope because like we have many people who are very talented and who has a lot of potential. But it's very hard, as I mentioned, to navigate protests inside the country today or do anything like any opposition activities inside the country. It's super dangerous and people are scared. But we try to press all the buttons and who knows which one is gonna work. It's not like one button, one tool is gonna end the regime, but something can lead to some cracks. Some crack will be smaller, some crack will be bigger, and you just do whatever you can. And there are many things we can do from abroad, and we have projects like anti-corruption investigations that we continue doing. We try to collaborate with Western governments, in order to prevent corruption abroad, to sanction those who fuel the war. We have an amazing project that is called List of 6,000 Names, which actually consists already more than 7,000 names. We put those names of Putin supporters, of war enablers, and everyone who's like related to this propaganda machine, like Russian celebrities who support the regime. So we put all of those names to that list with proofs why those people must be personally sanctioned. We also work a lot to educate people inside Russia, to raise awareness. We have a very big media that is called Popular Politics. It's a YouTube channel. Actually, it's a big media hub. We are available on every platform. we broadcast almost 24/7. We do everything we can, like news, interviews, opinions of different experts on different topics. So we operate as a big media in order to raise awareness, to reach those people who don't have access to truthful information, who don't know where to find it. So we try to find those people and educate them to raise awareness. So you don't know which button is going to work eventually. And we also provide legal aid to those who want to escape drafting to the war. So men who don't want to go to the war. And they sometimes they need legal assistance, and we also work with those groups of people. So we try to be helpful everywhere we can in order to weaken the regime. And fortunately, we're not just one organization, there are many. And I still have hope that something is going to work.
Very important that you don't lose this, okay? This is your inheritance through Bitcoin.
Let Bitcoin rip. Don't rip up your Bitcoin. Set up inheritance with Casa.
The war is such an interesting one because I spend a lot of my time in two specific areas of the world. I spend a lot of time in the UK, so Europe, and a lot of time in the US. And when I'm in the US, and certainly I live in both those communities online as well, whether that's Facebook and Twitter. I see the American audience and I see the British and European audiences. And it's something I've discussed with, do you know Matthew Maczynski? You'd get on well with him. But anyway, I've discussed it quite a bit with him. And I think you've probably experienced this a bit as well, Danny. And I'd be interested in the Australian perspective on this as well from your time there. But there's certainly a conservative Republican opinion which seems to be very anti America's involvement in the Ukraine war and the amount of money or weapons that have been sent to help defend the Ukraine, and a lot of focus on what they believe is corruption within Zelensky's administration and just criticism of Zelensky. And I don't see that so much from the more kind of progressive side of America, but I see very little of it at all in Europe. In Europe and the UK, I think the majority of people are much more siding with supporting, helping Ukraine. And the limited amount of opposition I see tends to be more from them kind of like conservative voices who seem to be Americanized, the Lawrence Foxes. Mm-hmm. They seem to repeating a lot of what the US kind of conservative side, repeating the same criticisms of Zelensky. And there's almost like a certain amount of Putin apologism that exists. Mm-hmm. But it's very interesting seeing almost the entirety of Europe being in defense of Ukraine and wanting to support them, yet it's split the US. Is there any perspective like that from Australia? Is it?
No, Australia has no skin in the game, both like geographically.
Is it discussed?
Yeah, it's definitely discussed, but I think they would probably fall generally, like very broadly speaking, more in line with like the European viewpoint.
Yeah.
But I do also understand like the Americans' perspective of not wanting to kind of tip the scale in another foreign war that, doesn't have a direct impact on them.
Yeah, no. I totally understand that argument, but it's when it's tinged with this kind of like over criticism of Zelensky. Like Tim Pool was a perfect example, right? Tim, do you know Tim Pool?
Yeah, I heard about this case.
Yeah, he's a fucking idiot. He overtly would be almost like a Putin apologist, directly criticizing Ukraine as Zelensky, but not even-handed. Like if you use even-handed and criticizing Putin, like I'd at least say you're being trying to be partially objective, but it was entirely one-sided argument.
I mean, if you criticize Zelensky, it doesn't mean that you must stop supporting Ukraine.
Of course, yeah,
and Ukrainians, because today Ukraine relies fully on Western support. And if they're not supported by Ukraine, they can lose this war, and that will lead to some terrible results for the entire world in the end, because Putin probably will not stop. And who knows what's going to happen after if he takes over Ukraine. But you know what's upsetting me the most when I hear something like from some Americans that it's not only we should stop supporting Ukraine, but they take pro-Russian side. I mean, if you don't want to support Ukraine, okay. I mean, not okay, but it's your idea. But it doesn't mean that Putin is a good president. Like we should agree on Putin's terms. And no, it's a very bad narrative that I don't like. I understand that people saying that we don't want our taxes to go to Ukraine. We want our money to stay in our country, but they don't think about the big picture. Okay, your taxes will stay in your country, Ukraine will lose the war, but what will be the outcome of that? It can get much worse for your country as well. So, like, letting Putin win this war can make Putin like more greedy,
stronger,
confident.
Where next?
Do you want to live in the world where Putin conquers some countries?
Lithuania, Moldova, Estonia,
I hope not.
Latvia.
I hope it's not going to happen.
But that's the fear from people. Like I know people who live across the old Soviet
people have
countries.
this fear. I just read an article yesterday. I live in Lithuania, and I hear it. Labas, yeah. And I hear from Lithuanians, when they find out where I work, they very often ask for my opinion if Putin is gonna invade Lithuania as well. And I always say that look at Putin fighting in Ukraine right now. He cannot even move forward in Ukraine. And you really believe that he's going to enter European country? He doesn't have like people who want to do that. He has to draft men from prisons to do that. So I highly doubt that. But I just read an article yesterday that says that Lithuania has 15,000 volunteers, like a union of shooters, people who like shoot guns, and they do some trainings to like learn how to shoot properly in case if Russia invades Lithuania.
So they're prepping.
So people have these ideas in their head that it could happen, and that is terrible. I feel very bad about that.
Do you think? Do you think then certainly some people have been victims of the export of Russian propaganda across the world? Because sometimes I just. I've not been to Russia. I've not been to Moscow. Okay, so I can't judge from the inside. Mm-hmm. My judgment comes from what I've seen in the media, but also speaking to people like yourself and people I know who are Russian, who have been to Russia. Like I've got a pretty clear picture that it is a not far removed from what was created in East Berlin, which is a state which is all about control and fear and uses violence, propaganda, and corruption. Mm-hmm. That's my belief. I'm pretty secure with those ideas. But I've also been to Ukraine. I've been to mm-hmm. Kyiv, and it was I traveled there like I would travel to anywhere in Europe. Okay, I turned up. I had an Airbnb booked. I went to the football with my old business partner Ollie. We went to bars. We went to restaurants. It was a free European country. It was beautiful. It was brilliant, and had a great time. And I'm pretty certain these two countries are polar opposites in terms of the lives that people get to lead in them. I'm pretty secure in those views. And so I don't understand this almost Putin apologism that exists when people don't understand one of these countries is free and one isn't, especially when it comes from people who are from a pro-freedom country.
Probably like those people, if you talk about Americans, they are too far from this conflict. They never travel to this part of the world. They don't know what they're talking about. Mm. But it's true that Ukraine took this turn to become a free country, to become democracy. And Putin so much didn't like it because Ukraine is a former Soviet Union country, and Putin doesn't want Soviet Union countries to become like fully democratic, and to give an example for Russians that Russians can also live in a free country. Putin doesn't like it that Ukraine took pro-European turn, and that was one of the reasons to like try to conquer Ukraine, because he wants to stop Ukraine from developing democracy, and but people who never travel to this part of the world, they like have no clue. They think that Russia, Ukraine, Belarus are all the same, and probably like Lithuania. And as you mentioned, that's probably people in Lithuania, they also are victims of Russian propaganda. There is a part of truth in this, because those countries are close to each other, and of course some Russian propaganda gets through the border to the neighbors. And as we discussed before, some people believe that there is 80% of support of Putin, and I hear it a lot in Lithuania as well. People ask me, is it true? Is it true that you have 80% of support? So Russian propaganda is very strong. It affects people even in like neighboring countries.
It's a lifetime commitment being an activist, right?
For me,
Yeah.
I don't see myself doing anything else, and I was questioning myself. I was thinking, like, if not this, then what else I would like to do in life? And I realized even if I don't work for the Anti-Corruption Foundation, I will still be doing something similar. I would be fighting against some dictatorships, or I will be contributing to others' fight against dictatorships. I'll help other activists. And this is what I'm actually doing at the Human Rights Foundation. Since I have long experience of working in this field, I can share my experiences. I can share some tools with those who need those tools in order to fight against Venezuelan regime or any other. I can bring my knowledge and say, hey, we used this and it was successful, so you can take it, I can teach you. And I don't see myself like working in some businesses,
corporate
job. Yeah. And I don't mean that it's a bad job,
It's just not you.
It's just not me. It's something like, it's who you are. And it's not my job. And it's hard to explain it sometimes to people who work in different fields. For example, when I'm on my phone on the weekend or having a vacation, then I suddenly stop, take out my laptop and start doing something. And people ask me, why are you replying to those messages? It's already like nighttime or it's a weekend. Why are you working?
Hey, we do that in the corporate world as well.
Yeah? Okay.
So it's funny you talk about the tools. We've obviously changed this podcast to be a bit more broad.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons being is that the Bitcoin thing was always a barrier, I felt, for people. And I felt like we should go and have much broader conversations and then introduce Bitcoin to people at various other times. And it was yesterday I was talking to somebody about Bitcoin. They're like, oh, I don't understand anything about Bitcoin. It's magic internet money, whatever. I was like, well, tomorrow I'm interviewing somebody who's a human rights activist who uses Bitcoin as a tool to be able to finance activism in and outside of Russia to fight against Putin. And the instant reply is, oh, that's fascinating. I didn't know that. And there's so many people, I think, don't realize the true power of what Bitcoin is or what it helps an organization like yours.
Yeah, and it's funny that till 3 years ago, I wasn't realizing it either. Even if we had been using Bitcoin since 2016, I never even thought about that it was a big deal. We were just using it. Okay, we use rubles, we use Bitcoin. Okay, not a big deal. Because when operating in Russia, during that presidential campaign, we began a crowdfunding campaign and we were collecting donations from our supporters and we were accepting Bitcoin donations together with rubles. And some people wanted to remain anonymous. I mean, our donors. Some people were scared to donate openly, so they preferred Bitcoin. And we were collecting donations in both ways. I never thought about that it was a big deal till the moment I met Alex Gladstein from the Human Rights Foundation.
We love Alex.
Everyone loves Alex. And I love his works. I love his books. And that was my first introduction to this world of Bitcoin when I read his book, Check Your Financial Privilege. Yeah. He met me online and he invited me to the Oslo Freedom Forum to talk about Bitcoin and activism. And he told me, he just mentioned, he never promoted, he just said, I wrote a book on this topic. And I said, oh, can you please share the book with me? So he sent me the book. And I decided to prepare for the conference and to read the book before going there. And I read the book. And I was fascinated. I was like, wow, there are so many cool stories. So this book is basically a collection of stories of different activists from all over the world using Bitcoin in order to fight against their regime, in order to avoid government surveillance over their money transfers. And some of them are just completely deprived of access to fiat. And I read the book and I was like, wow, I belong to this story. I am a part of this. And I never even thought about it. And when I came to that Oslo Freedom Forum and I met all of those amazing activists, and I was like, oh, I know you. I read about you in this book. And now we're all friends with those people. But at that time, I felt like this is a whole new world. And I never even realized it. And now I try to orange peel all of my colleagues at the Anti-Corruption Foundation. And yes, I talk a lot about this topic, Bitcoin for activists, for freedom fighters, because when you talk to people outside of this Bitcoin community, you say the word Bitcoin, everyone thinks that it's about trading, making money, or scams, or crimes, like criminals using Bitcoin, like this kind of narrative. And I say, what about Navalny using Bitcoin? What about the fact that like all Russians in exile use Bitcoin because we cannot transfer money to Russia? We had to pay with Bitcoin for Navalny's funerals, because otherwise, like how? It's not possible to transfer money to Russia anymore. And I operate with Bitcoin on a daily basis for my work, pay salaries in Bitcoin, send money to support political prisoners, their families, to cover their lawyers.
Buy hats with Bitcoin?
We buy hats sometimes, if some businesses allow to do that. Yeah, it's true. So it's a big deal for so many people, and it's very important to raise awareness on this topic, because Bitcoin is not, it doesn't exist exclusively in this like Bitcoiners community. It's a very important tool for activists, and many regulators do not realize it, how important it is. Because today, if we didn't have Bitcoin, the Anti-Corruption Foundation, we would not be able to operate at all. Like, and when they try to regulate it, when they try to ban it, when they try to ban some privacy tools, and we are directly affected by those decisions. So it's very important to raise awareness on this.
What's happened with the privacy tools? What's the impact been?
I'll give you particular example of Anti-Corruption Foundation accepting Bitcoin donations. So we accept Bitcoin donations since 2016. We were doing it like with having a QR code on our online page. You can just scan it and send a donation. But till the moment I met Alex Gladstein, I never realized that it's actually quite dangerous to just openly receive Bitcoin, because the blockchain is transparent and you can still track the donor even if it's a Bitcoin donation. And we cannot control how people on that side, like from Russia, what kind of platforms they use when they're donating. Maybe they probably, highly likely, they go to platforms with KYC, they leave their personal data. And I don't know what platforms they use. Those platforms can leak this data to the Russian government easily. And it will be very easy to track the donor, and just if they track the donor will be sentenced to up to 8 years of prison for donating to an extremist organization. So it's like a huge risk.
Has that happened? Have people been prosecuted for it?
People are prosecuted. There are some cases that are happening right now, and for donating to Ukrainian army, but a government goes against everyone with the help of the banking system in Russia. It's a fact, and there is a law that you cannot donate to an extremist organization, otherwise you will be arrested up to 8 years. And we accept Bitcoin donations, but it's still not completely safe to do that like that. We need to use some certain tools in order to protect our donors. And those tools are like providing new Bitcoin address for each donation. Because if you just have a static address, they can take this address and like scan through the list of all donations that came to that very address. So if you provide a new address to each donation, you more or less protect. But if all of those donations, even with different addresses, they go to one certain wallet, for example, you work for FSB and you make a donation to one of those addresses. So eventually you will see everyone who donated, because your coin will be together with other coins in one wallet. Then, for example, I take some coins from that wallet and I pay salaries. So they can, again, track some donors. And we need some privacy tools in order to prevent that from happening. So like tools like CoinJoin are crucial for our work. And we need to mix this trace so they cannot catch anyone. And then what we see, what's happening in the West. They started going against those who create such tools. They say that they want to prevent criminals from
They always
using
want to
it.
protect
Yes,
criminals.
yes, it's always the case, but I think they just want to have full control over every financial system. Of course, everyone, like all governments, they are freaking out about like not having control, because it's not only the control over criminals, it's also they can use it for business purposes, for advertisement. Like it's a huge, like this financial system is a huge tool, and everyone wants to have access to it, especially governments. And when they ban it for their reasons, they never think about people like us. We're the most vulnerable, and we suffer like the first from such decisions. And it's also a very important topic that we should talk about. We should raise awareness, and I try to always mention it everywhere if I speak publicly on this topic.
Hence your second job with the HRF.
Yeah, I travel a lot. I go to many different events, including Bitcoin conferences. And actually, I'm amazed that this topic, Bitcoin and freedom fighters, Bitcoin and activists, becomes like bigger and bigger everywhere at every conference. If before Bitcoin conference was something about like different wallets, different platforms, now there's always a slot for Bitcoin and activism. And I remember when it just started like a couple of years ago, people were very skeptical at those conferences. They didn't want to go to those talks. They didn't want to listen about that. And I heard it many times. I don't want to listen to that because it's political and I'm out of politics. Bitcoin is out of politics. Everything is politics. If you're out of politics, politicians will regulate your Bitcoin so you will not be able to use it. So you should like pay more attention to those topics. But what I see now is that the most significant people from Bitcoin industry, they are most interested in this. And they, like Jack Dorsey was a speaker at the last Oslo Freedom Forum, the latest one, at the main stage, which is amazing. The Oslo Freedom Forum is a freedom forum event, is an event that brings activists from all over the world to talk about democracies. And there, Jack Dorsey is talking there on the main stage this year. We couldn't imagine something like that like 2 years ago, and now it's a big thing.
Well, I think we're very lucky to have you, and we're very lucky to have people like you willing to commit your life to being an activist, because I know there's a lot of sacrifices that you have to make, and we're just very lucky to have you.
Thank you. There are many activists, and even like those who don't think that they're activists, creators of privacy tools in Bitcoin world. They're actually activists. They support our job without even realizing it. So like being an activist, it's not necessarily going in the streets and, like protest with posters. You can do so many things to fight against dictatorships, not necessarily openly.
Creators of privacy tools are now risking arrest and prosecution.
Yeah, now it's risky.
From the West, and you risk arrest and prosecution from Russia. I think almost any activist these days is taking on some kind of risk. There's an easier, more comfortable life out there where you go and get a corporate job and you work in HR or marketing and you go and get dinner on a Friday night and have a holiday each year. There's an easy, comfortable life for most people. But like any activist is taking on some element of risk and also personal sacrifices. I know it. So
but those people who work in the corporate world, whether they understand it or not, or those people who say that they are out of politics, they don't understand that those activists are those people who provide them this comfortable life because they fight against like bad decisions of the governments. They fight for democracy, and your country has democracy because there are some people who achieved that, who made this country to be free, and you can go and have your dinner in the restaurant, and you can say whatever you want out loud. You're not going to be arrested because there are some certain people who worked hard to achieve that.
It's the only thing I haven't asked you. You wish I had. Any questions you wish I'd asked you?
I don't know how you like feel, or what else, personal or political.
If people listen to this and want to find out more, or want to support the causes, where would you send them?
If you want to support particularly the Anti-Corruption Foundation, you can go to the website acf.info. Sorry, you should remove it because it's
Do that again.
website.
We can edit it.
Yeah, acf.international. So if you want to support the particular cause of the Anti-Corruption Foundation, you can go to our website, acf.international, and you will find a donate page, and you can donate whatever you want there, or you can just spread awareness about everything that we were talking about here. If you want to support the Human Rights Foundation, you can as well go to hrf.org and find a way how to donate or support the organization. Or you can just spread information. You can reach out directly to me and ask any questions. I'm available everywhere on Twitter or Signal and even Telegram because my mom is still there. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Anna. We're very lucky to have you. Appreciate you coming in to talk about this with us. And yeah, stay in touch. Good luck, and we'll see you at some more football soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, everybody.